welcome to another episode of Chat with Brandy. This is episode number 6, and if you can't tell, this is our Halloween special. Ooh. I have my friend Meena here with me today, and I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. But first, I just want to preface that the education provided in this video, as always, should not replace professional advice to you individually. But we hope that this will be a really good, spooky, educational video for you guys.
Hi, thanks for inviting me, Brandy. This is amazing. I am an independent insurance broker, so life, critical illness, disability, that type of insurance, and also a financial planner. So mostly my job is to tell people about all the things that can go wrong. And today we're going to talk about death. Ah!
I just died off camera just now, and I am currently a ghost. Yes. I didn't bother drawing up a will. What's going to happen to my family, Meena?
Oh my God. Yet another person who doesn't have a will.
It's true.
So common, way too common.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a few things, Brandy, that are going to happen to your family because you didn't do a will. One of the first things that comes up that people don't realize is if you don't have a will and you don't have a named executor, which is part of your will, no one can access your money or your assets. The bank will freeze your accounts unless you have a joint account with your spouse, but even TFSAs, RSPs, your house, your car, there's a whole bunch of stuff that can't be accessed, and someone has to go to court and petition to get the estate process started and get an executor assigned, and that can take a long time, and there's a lot of things that need to be done in the interim. Your family probably wants to do some kind of funeral for you, and that costs a lot of money. And another thing that happens when people don't have wills is that the provincial estate laws take over, and in every province and territory this is different. So if you move, you need to find out how it works in your new province, although ideally you have a will with a lawyer in that province. But anyhow, the province decides who gets all your money. They have a list of rules, and you might not agree with how they want your money to be distributed. So if you want control over that, too late for you, but for everyone watching, very important to be able to have a say in your money.
Yeah, good point. I also did not bother with life insurance. Yeah. But my family will just truck on without me, right?
Well, it is Canada, so they hopefully will not end up on the street. But as we all know, most households now are relying on 2 incomes in order to pay all their bills. So when you have 2 partners sharing expenses, chances are they're not going to be able to make ends meet. You certainly don't want to have to sell your house to pay your bills, switch to renting, especially when there's kids involved. It's a very traumatic time in anyone's life for anyone who is surviving your death. And there's extra cost. Funeral costs can easily be up to $10,000, even more if you want. Even a simple one is going to be a few $1,000s. There is a little bit of a Canada Pension Plan death benefit, but the max you can get is $2,500, which really doesn't go very far at all. And usually you don't expect your grieving spouse or partner to go back to work right away. Right. So normally I recommend having at least a year or so of expenses. If you have kids, there's usually extra childcare costs. You might want a house cleaner. There's a whole bunch of different costs that come up without life insurance. Your family has no extra cash to pay for any of those things. And also there sometimes can be tax consequences as well that they have to pay out of their own pocket.
Yeah, that's so true. A lot of people don't even think about the tax consequence that can come on death. But there are certainly cases where your estate can be taxed. So a big one is RSPs. Canada Revenue Agency deems that you sell your RSPs or you cash your RSPs out the day before you die. So what that means is all of that RSP income becomes taxable income to your estate. Now there are ways to further defer that tax. So one way would be to have your spouse, minor children, or if you have a disabled adult that is financially dependent on you, take that cash and put it directly into their own RSP within the same year of your death, then that tax would be deferred until they eventually take that money out. But if you don't have anybody to take that, or they want to just keep that cash, for example, because they don't have a life insurance policy or something, your estate will get taxed. And that can be like anywhere up to 40%, depending on what your
It's a huge amount.
Your
of
tax
money
bracket
you
is,
might
yeah,
lose.
absolutely.
Wow. Yeah.
The other one that's really common is not your primary residence, but if you have a second house, so a rental or like a cottage or a vacation home that isn't going to go to your spouse, but let's say you want it to stay with your children or somebody else, your estate will be taxed on that as a capital gain. So if you want your family member, whoever it is that you're leaving it to be able to pay for the taxes on that without actually selling the property, a life insurance policy is a really good idea in that situation. So just some things to think about. Now, what about those will kits that I've seen at the registry office or online, like the do-it-yourself ones? What do you think about those?
So normally for most things, we think that something is better than nothing. We talk about that a lot in the insurance industry. But with those will kits, yes, absolutely, that is something you're legally able to do. But I think they can give you a false sense of security, thinking that everything is taken care of, when what is quite common in those is that information might be missing. There might be parts that are open to interpretation. If you have disgruntled family members or various people in your life who might want to contest a will.
Spooky skeletons.
Yes, yes, skeletal family members tend to come out of the closet,
Yes.
you know, when someone dies, especially if you have a lot of money, trying to get a part of that. And like I said earlier, some of these laws vary by province to province as well. So it's always best to have a lawyer who lives and works in the province that you happen to die in. Well, you know, if you move, you get it reviewed again. To take a look at it and make sure that you've covered all your bases and that when it goes to court, it's going to stand up. And it just makes it so much easier and cheaper for your family to take an estate to court. Can be $10,000, possibly even more. You have to hire a lawyer. It takes a lot of their time. It can take a very long time to get everything dealt with. But by having a will in place, usually it's $1,000 or even less for a couple, including some other documents. So there's really no excuse to
Great
not
investment.
get that will done. Absolutely.
Are there any other documents that we should be thinking about besides a will?
Yeah, so usually your will is done as part of a package because there are a couple other documents that are extremely important to have. So one of those is called a power of attorney. And what that means is that if you are incapacitated, if you are injured or mentally cannot make your own financial decisions,
Coma or something like that?
yeah, exactly, something like that, bad car accident, you need someone else who can deal with your money. And how the laws work right now is your will doesn't do anything if you are alive. The executor has no power over your money if you are alive and in that coma. So you have bills to be paid. Maybe you need to take out a second mortgage on your house. There's all sorts of things that might need to be done with your money, and no one has the power to do anything unless you have that power of attorney document. And the other thing that is normally part of your package is called a living will or an advanced healthcare directive. And this is just a document that allows you to share with your family members and medical professionals what kind of things do you want if you're not capable of making your own medical decisions. So I'm sure you watched all the hospital shows with DNRs, do not resuscitate orders, and things like that. Heard of situations where the family keeps someone on life support for years. You know, what do you want? Do you want the full treatment? Do you want to be let go peacefully? Of course, these can change over your lifetime as well. And it just allows your family to not have to make these really kind of guess at what you want during these really, really hard, stressful, traumatic situations because they already have some idea what you want. So those are all very important documents to get all three done.
This is a place where you can make a decision on if you want to donate your organs and tissues as well, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So what about where should we be keeping these documents? Like, so once we get them all done, what's your best recommendation for where we should be keeping them?
Right. So a will is no good if nobody can find it. That is something to keep in mind. You do want to always have an original notarized copy. Often your lawyer might give you a few of these copies. I keep mine in a safe deposit box at the bank. It was only $40 a year, so totally worth it to not have to worry about that. You know, hopefully my house never burns down, but if it does, we know the documents are safe. What I also recommend doing is making a few copies and leaving them with your really trusted family members or friends, usually the people who would be the executors of your will, with also instructions on how to find the main will. And remember, there's fire damage, so there's fireproof safes and boxes and things like that. But floods are certainly a big deal. We've had a lot of floods in Millwoods over the last few years. So if you're storing anything in your basement, make sure it's in that Ziploc bag as well. So you don't want things to get wet in a disaster.
So also, and I think a lot of marriages are like this. When I was alive still, took care of all the banking and everything in my family. I don't think my husband would even have passwords for that kind of stuff. Yeah. What do you recommend for that?
Yeah, and Ghost Brandy, that is an extremely usual situation. Okay. Almost always in a couple, there's one person who is more interested in financial management than the other person is. And so there are a lot of things that are useful and really needed for dealing with your estate, but aren't necessarily included in the will. Okay. So things like, where are your bank accounts? Where are your investments? Lots of people use different banks, different investment companies, life insurance companies, even your employer. If you have an employer life insurance, who do you contact? Especially important if both people in a couple, like you might know stuff about your partner, but if you're both in an accident, whether you die or one person's in the hospital, you need another person who's probably not going to know all these little details that are required in order to more easily streamline the process. And the more information you have, the less you're going to have to pay for lawyers' times and accountants' times and things like that. And so I have made a little spreadsheet, well, not so little, because there's a lot of information that could be potentially useful that we will be sharing afterwards that just gives you an idea of the kinds of things that you should be writing down. And these are also things that can be updated too. It's a little bit trickier to update a will, so it's
expensive.
Nice.
It can be expensive,
you've got to
right?
pay for it, right? Yeah. Exactly. And so to have this other document that you can put, okay, I added this bank, added this insurance policy, I changed companies, that kind of thing. And, again, keep a few copies with trusted people, one with the will and then a few other ones around. Yeah.
And even if you think that your husband or your spouse has all of this in their mind, you'd be really surprised at what your brain can forget when you're grieving, right? So it's just a nice way. So definitely keep an eye out for Meena's magical spreadsheet that we will be linking later for you guys. Should people really be worrying about this kind of stuff if they just want to leave everything to their spouse?
Yeah, so some people tell me that. They're like, well, I just have a spouse. I don't care about anybody else. And there's also, sometimes I talk about people, they worry, are they going to have to pay the debts of their spouse? They think that they won't. And there's some gray areas there. Yes, hopefully all the money will go to your spouse, but there's no guarantee of that. Also, depending on how your estate planning is set up, some of the debts of your spouse you may be losing that money. The creditors may have a right to take that money away from you, and you're going to end up with less. So there's various different ways to organize your finances. Also be particularly cautious if you're living with someone who is just a common law partner and not a legally married spouse. Again, the definition of common law and what happens when a common law partner dies varies from province to province. You don't want to make assumptions. The provincial common law laws for estates are completely different than the 12-month rule that Canada Revenue Agency has that most of us are very familiar with. Completely different set of laws. And also if there's any kids, if there was an ex-spouse, they're still legally married to someone, and what if you both die in the same accident? So there's just way too many little factors to just make that assumption. So again, you should both have a will. Maybe a very simple will is commonly the case, but still it's very important to have that done to protect both people.
Okay, now I have a mortgage and a car loan, and the bank sold me life insurance when I got those loans, so I should be fine, right?
So yeah, that's a very common thing. The banks like to add on a life insurance policy. They say it's just a few dollars a month, and of course they're gonna profit from that as well. So those types of policies, they protect your credit, or they protect the bank, they protect the car loan company, in that if something happens to you, all that money goes to pay off your mortgage or your debt, but you don't have any cash. No matter how much you've been paying, if your house originally was worth $500,000, you die when your mortgage is down to $20,000, it just pays off the $20,000.
Yeah.
You get nothing for your own uses. So, And if it only covers life insurance, I just want to mention also that if you're disabled or you have an illness, you may also need money, and you may not be getting any money for those types of situations. So I recommend always having your own individual policy that'll follow you no matter whether you sell a house, switch banks. Then you will get that money and you can decide what to do with it. Do you pay off the mortgage? Do you pay some of the mortgage off? Do you use it for your kids' education savings? There's so many other options and different ways to use that money, and I want you to have that choice. So
your loved one will have that choice, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the gift you're giving them.
Yes, to be able, you don't want to be forced into a corner when someone dies. You're already in enough of a bad situation. So what I do always recommend to people, though, is you never want to gap insurance. So when you get a new mortgage, say yes to the bank's policy, have that there, and then immediately go to your trusted insurance broker and see if you can get a policy on your own. And if you can, once you're signed up for that and the policy is started, then you can go and cancel the one with the bank. But don't risk not having an insurance policy, and some people will not qualify for what the bank will give you. So just to be aware of that. That's definitely, in this case, something is better than nothing. So if you can't get something else, stick with the bank, but an individual policy will serve you better.
Yeah. All right. So you've definitely scared me here. I guess it's too late for Ghost Brandy, but do you have any tips for other people out there that aren't dead?
Yeah, so just a few more things. Again, when people assume that their spouse is going to get their property, that can depend on a lot of different factors. When you're talking with your lawyer about wills, they'll want to know how your different property is titled, and that means the way that the ownership would be distributed upon the death of one of you is mainly what that affects. I know it sounds complicated, but your lawyer will help you understand that. It's really not that complicated, but it'll help you know. So, Ghost Brandy owns a house. What's going to happen to that house afterwards? Will it go to her husband or not? There's other things that can potentially happen to that. So you want to be aware of that. Also be aware of if you have a joint account. A lot of people do that with a parent. You might not be able to access that money. So you want to definitely talk to professionals and find out what the pros and cons of having a joint account with someone who isn't your spouse. And definitely something that people will forget that I deal with a lot in my industry is if you get separated, divorced, you get remarried, anything that you previously had a beneficiary on, so a work life insurance policy, your own, your TFSAs, your RSPs, anything where you can name a specific person, make sure that you've changed that if you want to make sure that the right people get your money, because sometimes the ex-spouse will get all the money that you wanted your current spouse and children to have if you haven't updated that. So that's something extremely important to just check with your insurance company and don't assume, and make sure that is set up how you want it to be set up.
And the lawyer should be going through all of these things with them, presumably, when they're
ideally,
doing their will.
yes, but it's always good to be prepared because, even the best lawyer is not going to remember necessarily every single little detail.
Well, they don't know
of
everything about your life.
Also, unless you're fully disclosing everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The more you know. So thank you so much for all of your wisdom today, Meena. Death and taxes is a pretty complex and morbid subject, but it's really important because everybody dies. Trust me on that one. It's just kind of unavoidable. So we're going to leave our viewers with some final tips here. So we're going to say, give your loved ones a gift this Halloween and speak to a lawyer about drawing up a will, healthcare directive, and a power of attorney. Speak to a life insurance agent about life insurance. Speak to a financial planner about succession and estate planning, and speak to a tax professional about how to reduce your tax burden at death. And Meena, where can our viewers find you for more information?
So right now, probably the easiest way to reach me is through my Facebook page. So we're going to leave a link to that. And you can direct message me through my Facebook page, and my phone number is there as well. So you can easily get in touch with me that way.
Yeah, we'll be leaving definitely Meena's contact information, Meena's magical spreadsheet, just more resources on wills, as well as the organ and tissue donation registry for Alberta. And as always, the show notes will have some more information on everything we covered here. So we hope you have a safe and happy Halloween. And since I'm not actually dead, gotcha, I will be seeing you next week. And don't forget to take your kids' candy tax this week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.